There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling force, and we're here, a new unsettling force for liberation, and we've got nothing to lose but our chains. We've got nothing to lose but our chains, and we've got nothing to lose but our chains.
So welcome all to the Policy Platform Study Group. Welcome, Margaret. I see you've joined us. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can get started. I'm glad that you all are here. And we're gathering to consider, Margaret, you put that song from the group named War in my mind. So now that's playing on loop. Right? War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Right? So I just want to welcome you as we take under consideration the question of what we can do to end the culture of war. So I'm Nell Myhand. I use she, her pronouns. I am on unceded Ohlone land, also known as Oakland. I'm a brown-skinned Black woman, about 65 years old, wearing a Black sweatshirt. And behind me are our honored featured speakers for this weekend's convening. I'm going to start early and often reminding you about the convening, inviting you to come. So Bishop Barber and Reverend Theo Harris on one side and Attorney Shally Gupta Barnes on the other side are our featured speakers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Margaret. Margaret, are you still here and available to?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Really, let me put in my headphone here. You could hear me a bit better and I could stop moving around here. But welcome all of you, and welcome to our presenters, and to thank our presenters today, and Nell, who coordinates our reading group. And I'll have to say, how timely is today's topic as we're trying to make sense of what is happening over in the Ukraine. And we actually hear the propaganda coming from both sides, I'll have to say. But looking at all of the suffering that's happening, it really does speak to, Nell, what you were saying about war. What is it good for? I mean, if we look back at any war, whether it was in Libya, in Syria, in South Korea, the Vietnam War, and you saw all of the suffering and atrocities that happened during those wars by all of the parties involved in the wars. We are watching all of this play out directly in front of us right now. And it's been hard for those of us who don't want a war economy and who are anti-war and peace campaigners to speak out about what is happening now, without it being taken as the wrong way, without it being taken that one is supporting the horrific invasion that has happened to the people of Ukraine. And of course, that is not the case whatsoever. I know on the national broadcast that I do, Sojourner Truth, a few days ago, we did a show where we played voices of anti-war campaigners from around the world, from Spain, from the UK, from France, from India, from the US. And I think I'm going to likely rebroadcast that again tomorrow, just to get some of those voices out. So I really want to thank Jackie and Rosanna, who have been doing this work for decades now, and for all of you for taking time in your busy schedules to be with us today. I'm really looking forward to the presentations and to the small group discussion. So all of you, please stay well and safe. And thank you again for joining us. And please, I'm sure now you'll announce all of the exciting upcoming events that we have coming up as the Poor People's Campaign, and specifically in California. So thank you so very much. Thanks now.
Margaret, thank you so much. So, but anyway, I think we are all gathered together now, and with the intention of, applying ourselves to how the demands in the policy platform would make a difference in our lives, our personal lives, our society, and the world. If we, continue to press for these demands, will it make a difference? Yes, it will. So yeah, so we're going to hear from folks who have expertise in many different areas on this issue, including a personal testimony. And in the process of getting ready for the convening, I've been working with the testifiers, and something that has become more and more clear is that a testimony is really, it's a sacred gift, that the experiences that inform our work impacted people sharing their stories. Our work is amplifying those stories and building power to change policy so that those stories become fewer and fewer, right? Until we've eliminated the root causes. And so I want to just invite all of us to appreciate what it takes to bring that story and to hear it as a call to action. It's not a performance. When we ask people to testify, we're in a society where everything is like, it's a performance and you feel good afterwards. You shed a few tears. This is not that. This is actually a call to action. So with that, I want to say that Jackie Cabasso and Rosanna Cambrone are here as our presenters. And we're going to go through the presentation and then have breakout groups, and then we'll come back from the breakout groups before we close for the day. Anything else before we move forward?
Rosanna, would you like to introduce yourself first, and then I'll introduce myself and take it first part?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Rosanna Cambron. I'm with Military Families Speak Out, and I am a Mexican-American older woman with gray hair. The background is what I really feel is a strong message by the Poor People's Campaign that we're a new unsettling force. I really believe that. And I'm wearing glasses, if you can see that, I don't know, and a white sort of striped or leopard design jacket. And I live in occupied, unceded Tomva land, otherwise known as Los Angeles, California. I think that's it, right?
Thank you. Okay, so I'll be co-hosting with Rosanna today. My name is Jackie Cabasso, she, her. I'm in the San Francisco East Bay on unceded Ohlone territory. I was having some technical problems today. I apologize for the low light situation. I'm at a different computer in a different part of the house. But behind me, you can see is a tapestry of Mount Fuji that my father made. He made latch hook rugs as a hobby. He was a virologist. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce myself. I'm the executive director of Western States Legal Foundation in Oakland, which is a 40-year-old nuclear disarmament advocacy and peace organization. I'm also national co-convener of United for Peace and Justice, which is a national partner of the Poor People's Campaign, and Western States certainly considers itself to be a partner of the California Poor People's Campaign. So I am also an impacted person in a different way. So I just want to share that for a little bit, because we began at the height of the anti-nuclear movement in the early 1980s, when fear of nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union was palpable, and it was a huge movement. And our organization was founded to provide legal support for nonviolent anti-nuclear protesters, first at the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant and then at the Livermore Lab. And we are grounded in commitments to nonviolence and international law, which has naturally connected us with many other movements. And for people like me who have lived with the knowledge of the potential for nuclear war every single day for more than 40 years, seeing what's playing out now in the Ukraine is like a kick to the gut. It's really scary. So it's affecting me and my colleagues in a way. I mean, I know it's affecting everyone, but it's affecting us in a more personal way, I think, because this is everything we've worked hard to try to prevent, and we see it playing out now. So with that cheery note, thank you for letting me share that. So let's, I guess we plunge into the slides now, yes? So welcome everybody to the March 10th, 2022 Jubilee Policy Platform Group. In this session, we're going to connect the policy platform to the current period of mobilization towards Saturday, June 18th, 2022, when we will, if we can, march on Washington, D.C. for a mass Poor People's Assembly. So the image description here on the left is there's a Poor People's Campaign logo, which is a black silhouette of a massive group of people with arms and flags raised with the word California across the top in black letters on a white background. Poor People's Campaign across the silhouette is a picture of Pablo Picasso's painting Guernica, which he painted in 1937, which is considered to be one of the most iconic and powerful anti-war paintings. And it's a little bit hard to describe it, but it's because it's in a kind of cubist form, but there are animals and people and somebody screaming with outstretched arms. It's in black, white, and gray. There's a body on the ground, and the painting itself is so iconic that it evokes the horrors of war and the need to end war. So there are many examples of how the Poor People's Campaign is amplifying the voices of people impacted by the interlocking injustices, systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism and the military economy, and the distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism. National broadcasts statewide and regional meetings and actions that include testifiers sharing their lived experience, passing the microphone to people like Kenya Alcacer, who serves as a tri-chair of the National Steering Committee. Kenya is a mom of two amazing children and the co-director and organizer of Unión de Vecinos, a network of neighborhood groups in Los Angeles. All that, and she's in a fight to stay in this country where she and her family have lived since she was a small child. Let us know in the chat if you want to help her fight her asylum case. Dr. Wensler Noisy and the Apache Stronghold, who are fighting to protect Oak Flat, their sacred site, which is being threatened with destruction by a copper mining company, which is arguing that it owns the right to the copper under the site. And Miss Callie Greer of Birmingham, Alabama, behind a podium, pictured with Reverends Theo Harrison Barber, wailing in grief over the loss of her two children, one to gun violence and the other to cancer that she had trouble getting treated, being poor in a state that refused to expand Medicaid. So there are three photos, which I've kind of described. On the far left is Callie Greer, in the center is Kenya Alcacer speaking at a congressional hearing. And on the right, Reverend Theo Harris is pictured receiving a burden basket from Dr. Wensler Noisy in San Francisco. So building power to change the policies that make us poor and keep us in poverty is a second focus of our work. Congress, state houses, and courts are where we concentrate our attention, delivering audits, budgets, and policy recommendations, and work with legislators like Congresswoman Barbara Lee and Pramila Jayapal, who co-sponsored the third Reconstruction Resolution to fully address poverty from the bottom up. Inspired by the work of the Poor People's Campaign, these representatives are putting the question to their colleagues. Are you prepared to address the needs and concerns of your constituents who are poor? At the link in the chat, you can read the resolution and find out if your congressperson is signed on. And what we're seeing on this slide is that there are two images. On the left is a screenshot of the Congress Got .gov page for HR 438, a congressional resolution to fully address poverty from the bottom up, where you can read the resolution and see if your congressional rep has signed on. So now you're going to hear more detail about the mobilization. We're in a January to June 18th, 2022 and beyond mobilization for a mass poor peoples and low-wage workers assembly and March on Washington. We're planning for 4 milestone events. On Sunday, March 13th at 3 p.m., we'll be holding the Western Region virtual convening. Monday, April 4th, will be a day of public readings of Dr. King's prophetic speech, Beyond Vietnam, Time to Break Silence. Monday, May 16th, will be the Western Region More tour stop in Los Angeles. And on Saturday, June 18th, 2022, we're planning, as if we'll be able to gather in person, for the Poor Peoples and Low-Wage Workers Mass Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C. And on this slide, there are several images, a QR code, the California Poor People's Campaign logo, a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King, a black, gold, and white bumper sticker that says we must do more, and a black, gold, and white digital banner that announces the June 18th, 2022 Mass Poor People's and Low-Wage Workers Assembly. That's kind of a collage of images and words describing the 4 milestone events. On Sunday, March 13th at 3 p.m., the Western Region virtual convening will bring together all regions, working groups, and partners to meet one another, discuss how the work is going, and get updates and tools for the April, May, and June events. And you can register at the link that I believe is going to be dropped in the chat. So the image description here is a flyer for the March 13th convening. There's a photograph of our national co-chairs, Reverend Theo Harris and Reverend Barbara on the left side. And on the right side, a photograph of Shaylee Gupta Barnes, the policy director for the Poor People's Campaign nationally. And the three of them, we're very pleased to say, will be joining us for Sunday's regional convening, as well as a number of very powerful testifiers, including Kenya Alcazar. The second event in the January to June mobilization is a day of public participatory readings of the Beyond Vietnam speech throughout the state and region on April 4th. By 6:01 p.m. Eastern, there will have been at least 54 public readings of Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, in at least 3 languages, American Sign Language, Spanish, and English. 54 readings, 1 for each year since Dr. King's assassination, 6:01 p.m. Eastern, because that's when the emergency room doctor pronounced him dead. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. declared this in his prophetic speech, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, delivered on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before his tragic assassination. He went on to name the United States government as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. In the speech, King preaches that nonviolent direct action is our greatest hope and best tool to bring about the changes we seek. When Dr. King gave this speech, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War. The country was in turmoil as peace activists resisted the draft and anti-war and civil rights protesters took to the streets. King's speech laid bare the relationship between US wars abroad and the racism and poverty being challenged by the civil rights movement at home. And it was controversial in some parts of the civil rights movement. In this powerful speech, Dr. King provides both a diagnosis and a cure that remains fully relevant today. Quote, "I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered." End quote. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has picked up Dr. King's unfinished work, weaving the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, environmental devastation, militarism and the war economy, and a distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism into one moral fusion campaign. So please complete the form in the chat to sign up for a public participation of the Beyond Vietnam speech. And there are two images on this slide. On the right side is a black and white flyer with a picture of Dr. King looking reflective. This flyer is announcing the upcoming public readings of the Beyond Vietnam speech. And on the left is a newspaper clipping with an image of Dr. King speaking into a microphone. And a headline, Dr. King fatally shot by assassin in Memphis. So our hope is that many people attending, and that is attending the convening, will be inspired to help organize, and the reading, people, because this is a mobilization, will be inspired to help organize the third milestone event, the More Tours Stop in California. Our co-chairs, Bishop Barber and Reverend Theo Harris, will be with us to support our mobilizing, organizing, register, and engaging, educating, and empowering, that is what MORE stands for, people for a movement that votes. It's our chance to bring attention to the circumstances we find ourselves in here in California. For instance, 51% of people in California are poor or low income, a total of 20 million residents. This includes 62% of children, 54% of women, 61% of Black people, 71% of Latinx people, and 38% of white people. How can that be explained and made acceptable given that the California economy is worth over $3 trillion? California is the 5th largest economy in the world, coming in between the UK and Germany. We're currently discussing what our California legislative agenda is and invite you to join us in identifying priorities that we'll want to lift up and press for. And there are 3 images on this slide. On the right is Reverend Theo Harris speaking into a microphone. On the left is Bishop Barber, also speaking energetically into a microphone. And the image in the middle is a display of several 6-foot-tall vertical black and gold banners, several Poor People's Campaign placards, and a white 8-foot horizontal banner that reads California Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival tour. And all of this is leading to the June 18th, 2022, when we will march on Washington, D.C. in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands for a mass poor people's and low-wage workers assembly. With the networks we are building, energized by the transformative event being planned, we will become the awakened sleeping giant as we approach the 2022 midterms and onward toward the 2024 presidential election. And now we're going to show a short video to give you a sense of what's being planned.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do
to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's.
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together,
when we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Justice is coming soon. Hey, do you believe that of today?
So, don't you want to be part of that? I do. I plan to be there. So the Jubilee policy platform is designed to challenge the 5 interlocking injustices: systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism in the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. And what I just read is what is on the slide. So the Jubilee policy platform has 5 principles. We declare Jubilee, and there's an image on the left on this slide showing a bright yellow sunburst background with a bullhorn blaring out Jubilee. And the platform is grounded in these 5 principles. The first principle is that we need a moral revolution of values to repair the breach in our society. Where harm has been done, it must be acknowledged and undone. The image is a map of the United States with rips and tears loosely sewn together with thread labeled moral and a huge needle labeled revolution. The interlocking justices are being taken apart on the lower part of the poster with a pair of scissors. Second, everybody in, nobody out is written in bright yellow across a huge umbrella under which a lot of people are shielding from the rain. Too many people are hurting and we can't be silent anymore. Everybody is deserving of our nation's abundance. Third, when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. This is written in black letters on a yellow circular background, uplifted by a set of arms that read, lift from the bottom. Number 4, prioritize the leadership of the poor, low income, and most impacted. This is pictured in the poor people are, sorry about that. Let me say it again. Prioritize the leadership of the poor, low income, and most impacted. And these folks are pictured in leadership at the front of a large crowd with protest signs on this black and white poster. Those who are in the front lines of these crises must also be in the lead in identifying their solutions. The 5th principle is that debts that cannot be paid must be relieved. We demand freedom from servicing the debts we cannot pay. The image for this is a huge bolt cutter clipping through a length of chain, freeing a person's arm on the right side from a bomb with the word debt on it. The Jubilee policy platform has 5 parts and abides by our deepest constitutional and moral commitment to justice. The image on this slide is a white placard with a bright yellow sun as background, a ribbon across the top that reads, "We declare," and a bullhorn with the word Jubilee blaring out of it. So the 5 parts of the Moral Jubilee platform are part 1 was establish justice and end systemic racism, the right to democracy and equal protection under the law. Part 2, promote the general welfare, the right to welfare and an adequate standard of living. Part 3, ensure domestic tranquility, the right to work with dignity. Part 4, secure the blessings of liberty. the right to health and a healthy environment. And part 5, provide for the common defense, reprioritizing our resources. Today, we'll be talking about part 5, provide for the common defenses, reprioritizing our resources. We've previously studied parts 1 and part 2, but we've decided to rearrange the order in light of the upcoming readings of the Beyond Vietnam speech on April 4th, and also in light of the horrific war going on in the Ukraine. So we read this before, but just a reminder that in the Beyond Vietnam speech, Dr. King declared a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. So let's look at what that means. And the image on this slide is a black and white photo of Dr. King looking pensive. The first point under part 5, provide for the common defense, reprioritizing our resources, is number 1, end the culture of war. And I'm just going to highlight a few of its subpoints here. There's a long list, and I hope you will be intrigued to read the entire section. And this is an image, sort of an infographic that depicts who profits from war and militarism, showing different weapon systems and different large amounts of money, all being interconnected with crisscrossing circles, and this represents the weapons makers. Okay, so this is a slide that shows the entire list of items that we're going to be talking about, or that is in the section, I'm sorry. I'm going to be highlighting just these 2 for today. The US operates 800 bases in 90 countries, 10 times more than the rest of the world combined, and closing 60% of these bases will save $90 billion. And developing new treaties for complete nuclear disarmament, destroying US nuclear stockpiles, canceling nuclear delivery systems, which includes bombers, submarines, and intercontinental ballistic missiles, and canceling planned nuclear upgrades will save nearly $43 billion. And that slide was just a list of the entire section of the Moral Jubilee platform. The US Treasury divides all federal spending into 3 groups: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and interest on debt. Together, mandatory and discretionary spending account for more than 90% of all federal spending and pay for all the government services and programs on which we rely. Interest payments on the national debt account for a much smaller amount than the other 2 categories. Mandatory spending is legislated by Congress, often for multiple years at a time. It is dominated by the Social Security and Medicare programs, and it also includes Medicaid and widely used safety net programs like food stamps, welfare, and highway construction and maintenance. The multicolored pie chart on the left shows total federal spending in fiscal year 2021. Here you can see military spending, a green wedge, as a percentage of the total federal budget, and it looks like it's about 20% of the total budget. Discretionary spending refers to the portion of the budget that is decided by Congress each year through the appropriations process. By far, the biggest category of discretionary spending is spending on the Pentagon and the military. In most years, this accounts for more than half of the discretionary budget, and that's the figure we usually hear talked about. The pie chart on the right shows federal discretionary spending for fiscal year 2021. This is the blue section, and here you can see that military spending accounts for about half. Unlike discretionary funding, which must be approved by lawmakers each year during the appropriations process, tax breaks do not require annual approval. That means that once they are written to the tax code, they remain on the books until lawmakers change them. On average, these tax breaks tend to benefit corporations and the wealthy more than the average person. Just yesterday, March 9th, a bipartisan budget deal to fund the federal government for fiscal year 2022 was announced. The deal provides $730 billion in domestic spending versus $782 billion for the military and war. The National Priorities Project released the following statement, quote, "The budget deal announced today repeats a long-time pattern by putting more resources into the military and war then into K-12 education, affordable housing, public health, scientific and medical research, early childhood education and care, and homelessness combined. This continued special treatment for the Pentagon recklessly squanders precious resources that could be used to strengthen our families and communities. Even as war rages in Ukraine, a higher military budget can only risk a larger war. It can't promote real solutions and alleviation of suffering through diplomacy and humanitarian aid. And they go on. Military weapons and detention contractors are the biggest winners in this budget. In recent years, more than half of all military spending has gone to for-profit private contractors. The new spending bill promises to continue this windfall, providing for an even more expensive weapons system than the Pentagon requested, and promising to continue lucrative contracts for immigrant detention and surveillance. And this information is from the National Priorities Project of the Institute for Policy Studies, a national partner of the Poor People's Campaign. And US military bases and troops around the world. Note surrounding Russia. This is the number of US of nuclear weapons in the world and the damage they could do. But this is spending for new nuclear weapons, $43 billion a year from the US. This explains how nuclear weapons are used to provide a top cover for freedom of action, conventional military operations. And this is the Bravo test at Bikini Atoll in 1954, the largest nuclear test detonation. This is a blood red mushroom cloud, and there's some discussion about the effects of nuclear testing on indigenous people, primarily around the world. And then finally, to end on a more hopeful note, this is a march from 2005 in New York City. And I want to just drop the one thing that on March 1st, Reverends Barber and Theo Harris made a very powerful statement on Russia's attack on Ukraine, and which concludes, as Dr. King said, our choice in the face of nuclear war is not between violence and nonviolence, but rather between nonviolence and non-existence. We must choose peace, love, justice, and life. Okay, and I apologize for going on too long, but provide the texts. And it's now my pleasure to turn it over to my co-host, Rosanna.
Great, thank you so much, Jackie. We will provide the slides because there's a lot of really important information for people who are trying to make the calculation about where the money's going to come from to feed and house 140 million people. So Rosanna, I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
And are you ready for the slide, the next slide? Okay.
Yeah, yes, thank you. The next slide is on recognize that broad economic sanctions function as acts of war, and end these sanctions where there are in place, including in Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, Sudan, and Syria. Do not reauthorize the Budget Control Act when it expires in 2022. Delink military spending from social welfare spending and redirect military resources that have been cut towards securing basic needs here at home, as indicated in these platforms. And these are our demands.
Right.
Are those the slides?
Yes. There's one more. Actually, there's this one. Thank you.
Okay. Then shift the emphasis in our foreign policy towards diplomacy, reliving foreign debt relief, and humanitarian assistance.
Great, thank you so much.
And so, we have these statistics, and they're important in all of that we're doing. And is also, how do these statistics and data affect people directly, impacted, participating in these wars or affected by these wars? So I wanted to just sort of briefly let you know how it affected myself and my family. Our son joined the military when he was 21. They offered him $20,000. Here's a young man that it doesn't seem to be finding his place and is working jobs here and there. And they offer him $20,000 to join. So as you can tell, as you can conclude, it's a, it's kind of a pretty good offer. What they didn't tell him is that you won't get the $20,000 up front. That's one thing. Of course, this was very upsetting to our family, but we love our children and we want to support them when they're trying to carve out their path in life. So with him joining the military, we joined the anti-war movement. We found Military Families Speak Out. And Military Families Speak Out is a group that speaks out against the war, speaks to bringing our children home and taking care of them when they return. And we're members of the family or supporters of families with military loved ones in service. There are and were many things that the recruiters don't tell our children or our loved ones when they join. They don't tell them that our children they don't know what war is. They've never seen a dead body, maybe perhaps, or bodies, and how that really changes you. The recruiters don't tell you that the impact on your family, your mother, your father, your siblings, how they are going to worry about you, how some days they can't really function because they hear of a bombing and wonder if their loved one is among them. They don't tell you that your mother looks out the window daily to see if someone is walking up to their door to give them the bad news. The recruiters don't tell them how war will change your life, how war will change their lives. For every 4th of July fireworks and New Year's fireworks will be reminders not of celebration, but of gatherings of it'll trigger the wars, the experiences they had while at war. They won't tell you that the wad of paper thrown at you, which your brother often playfully did, will now frighten you. They don't tell you that your family will live paycheck to paycheck, and that at times you need to apply for government assistance to put food on the table. And they don't tell you that your children will also suffer from PTSD because they witness the flashbacks that you get. Although the recruiters tell you you'll get citizen status, they don't guarantee it. And they don't tell you that even some people you'll get deported because you're committing a crime attempting to deal with the PTSD that you are suffering and are experiencing. Two things that only military families really know that I would like to really share is one, that when you see a video of a father surprising their son or daughter or their spouse at a nurse or a school or anything like that, and the kid runs up to them and starts crying. Many people feel that it's a sign of joy and that they're happy to see them, but it's really a release of the fear that they have felt, not knowing whether their father, their mother, their son, or their daughter will come home alive. That's really what those tears signify. Most people will look at it as, oh, it's, they're so happy and this is great. No, but it's really that release that they're experiencing. The other thing that I'd like to share is that most people think that just because our loved ones are home, that's the end of the war, or because the war, the end of the war is declared that our children, that's the end of the war for them, but it's not. It continues on, and it's everlasting, as many have you seen in veterans. And so that I think those are very key things for people to know. I'd like to also say that this is a difficult thing to share because I'm always concerned about it coming off the wrong way, but I think many of us are also understand and put into perspective our situation compares to the situation the families in the war torn that are directly in line of fire are in. And so we don't lose sight of that. And I think sometimes, it pops into people's heads, oh, well, this, what about over there? Well, we do think about over there. We really do think about it. And lastly, I just want to say that one of the things that brought me a lot of solace is knowing that there are peace activists, that I'm not alone in trying to find and end this war and bring our loved ones home. That's it. Thank you.
So thank you, Rosanna. I want to invite everybody to take a breath. And we give thanks for that very powerful testimony, grounding us in the meaning of the numbers, right? Those numbers are important, but they're sterile. They're removed from what the impact, from the meaning in the lives of real people. And so that's why we include the testimony of people who are impacted, because it gives a face and meaning, so that as we are called to action, we have a story. If it's not our own, it's not our own, but we still have a story and a person who we're in community with, who we're working next to, who has given us this gift, really, of what it means to have a family member in the US military. So I want to just thank you for that. And thank both you and Jackie for bringing the demands of the campaign into clarity. So the next part of the agenda is a breakout room, and I've set up the breakout room so there are, most rooms have 4 and no room has more than 5 people in it. And we'll take 25 minutes. It's about 5 minutes to 1. And so we'll come back at 1:20. Let's go back at 1:20, so that we have some time to hear back from folks and then wrap up.
Felt like I was beamed out of the movie.
Rosanna, you had me in tears. I was thinking of all the years my brother was in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, and all of what we went through, and he's still ill today. I just heard from him earlier as a result. After all of these years.
How are you?
Yeah, it doesn't end.
You should testify in National PPC. I really hope we can do something as California to get your voice out there on this. It's a voice you don't hear that much, and we all need to hear it, Rosanna. Thank you.
Yep. I second that.
I will. I'm ready whenever.
So we have a few minutes, I guess, for any comments or questions that Rosanna and I were put in a breakout room with nobody else. So we spent the last 20 minutes getting to know each other, because we really have not had much one-on-one, and we found out that we know a lot of people in common. We know know people in several other organizations in common. So like 6 degrees of separation or something, right?
There it is. Yeah. So other folks, what came up for you? What was the call to action? We had a call to action came out of my group. So what call to action came out of your group?
Vote. And go to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And help get the vote out and get the vote protected by 1st November.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, for your help with tech support. Now you got to run. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah.
Wendy was in my group, and I just got to know her and Shanae Watts, and she's brand new to us, and I told them about the convening that's coming up on Sunday, because I can't, you did give me the job of czar of turnout, and I'm never leaving a chance to let people know that that's coming up, because it's only a few days away.
Yeah.
And thanks for your work pulling all of this together.
Absolutely. And I want to give another round of appreciation to our presenters, Jackie and Rosanna, and a special acknowledgement for Rosanna's powerful testimony. It's so important that we hear voices like yours. The first and most primary goal of the campaign is to amplify the voices of impacted people. And the second goal is to build power to change the policies that are creating those voices, right? Those stories. We need those stories to dwindle in number, but until those numbers dwindle, we need to be hearing them so that we are aware of the impact on real people's lives in our community and not in our community. You know, we are connected. Thank you all so much for being here, and I hope to see you at the convening, and if not there, in some other planning meeting. There are lots. Please watch for the newsletter. The organizers have hours that you can bring yourself or other people who are interested in plugging into those office hours. If you can't come on Sunday, you know, we're really reaching out and growing this campaign. So thank you all for being
Right,
here.
and the next
Thank
study
you.
group is April 14th, Thursday, April 14th.
Right.
Right.
And with that, if the spirit is moving somebody in the room to wrap us up, we would be grateful.
Okay. You guys know how to jingle that carrot. Really. Love you all.
So everybody here may not know the call and response that you're about to engage in. So if you could explain that.
We have a tradition here. It's forward together, not is what I will say, and you will respond with not one step back. The second part of this call and response is when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. And that's a good time to give yourself a little bit of a stretch, because I know we've been on Zoom for a while. Okay, let's hit it. Forward together.
Not one step
back. Okay. Good. Let's try this other. Okay, when we lift from the bottom,
Everybody rises.
whoa.